As the mother of a teenage boy and the friend of a male survivor of intimate partner violence, including sexual violence, I find it really upsetting to see that in my circles people will make negative discriminatory generalisations about men that would never be accepted if they were about women or minority groups. The excuse that this kind of reverse sexism is punching up doesn't satisfy me, as we are all victims of the patriarchy or culture of dominance that we have inherited, women, men, and everybody else. Toxic generalisations that seem to be tolerated or even encouraged in the West, in liberal circles, would include complaints that men won't commit, that the quality of men in the dating pool is low, that men lack subtlety and sensitivity and are only interested in a narrow range of subjects, that men need to do much better and that they have a one-track mind and that they're only interested in having sex indiscriminately as often as possible. All of these messages are damaging, but this last one is a particular recurring frustration, not only because it's clearly not true, but also because it has some very serious consequences. Firstly, it means that men may be taken less seriously when they report sexual harassment or assault. And secondly, it gives men a kind of get-out-of-jail-free card for sexual harassment. It's my nature and I was drunk. I remember being followed home by some drunken guy one night who was alternately threatening and pleading with me to go home with him, and "you know how guys are" was his excuse. Men are human beings. The Dalai Lama is a man, for goodness sake. Men might feel horny some of the time or even often, but as human beings they can use their awareness to make sure they don't act on it inappropriately. This is clear, and undermining men's humanity by likening them to beasts with no sexual control is a lie and a very damaging message. It may be that sexism against men isn't taken so seriously because although there's a large and well-regarded women's movement, in Western developed countries at least, that we mostly support, apart from a few influencers who want to ramp up the patriarchy and be allowed to dominate women, there's really not much of an established movement advocating for men's issues. I'm a feminist. I strongly believe that a woman is a man's equal and that there should be equal opportunities for all adults. I'm concerned about sexual harassment, which I've experienced from men and sometimes from women. I'm concerned about sexual violence, which I've experienced at the hands of men and which I know is usually committed by men. I'm concerned about domestic violence, and I know that the most dangerous of these physical assaults are committed by men. I'm concerned about the gender pay gap and about the fact that women are grossly underrepresented in governments and other power structures around the world. I'm concerned that women are doing more than our fair share of caregiving and housework, and that we're expected by the media and society at large to be young, beautiful, and absolutely brilliant at everything all the time. I'm a feminist, and I can see why it's tempting to offload all this anger and frustration onto men. But I maintain that this is not the path that will lead us to a fairer and healthier world. The fact is that all human beings are flawed. Not one of us can look back over our lives and see that we have behaved impeccably at every single moment. If men are doing more damage than women, it's because they have more power, both physically in their bodies and also within the roles in this patriarchal society that we've inherited. Also, the fact that men have mostly been raised to ignore and swallow their emotions and appear strong and invulnerable at every moment, so that the powers that be can exploit them as uncomplaining workers and soldiers, must surely contribute to the extent of male violence. And I can tell you one thing for sure: a violent man is not a happy man, and therefore these men are also victims of the culture of dominance. And while I'm on the subject of male violence, we often hear in the news stories of women being killed by men, terrible stories of women being hospitalised. And there are marches and demonstrations about this, as well there should be. But which group is the most common fatal victim of male violence? Other men. More men than women are killed by male violence, but nobody's talking about it. Nobody's marching about it. It seems that nobody cares. Men have a plethora of other issues that should be great cause for concern and compassion. They're far more likely to commit suicide, to be homeless, to be incarcerated, and to suffer from substance addiction than women are. They live a fair fewer years than women do, and this figure varies from country to country, so it seems it's not something innate. Also, in the developed West at least, they reach lower levels of educational attainment than women do. But, I hear you say, men are privileged. They're running the show, and a lot of them use their strength to dominate and abuse women. And statistics will tell you that you'd be right about that. But the truth, of course, is far more complex. I knew a man who told me that he used to get drunk every weekend and go home and beat up his wife. He also told me that when he was a child, his father used to regularly beat him mercilessly. The most entitled, selfish man I know is a tall white man with a posh voice and a good job, who expects his wife to do all the heavy lifting when it comes to housework, childcare, preparing meals, planning, just about everything really. And he has frequent affairs. Well, there you go, you see. There's a perfect example of a privileged, entitled man. Yes, and I can see the systemic advantages of being a tall, white, privately educated man. But I wouldn't exchange places with this guy because I know the backstory. He doesn't have any supportive friends. He was raised in an abusive family with alcohol problems and without reliable love and affection. His self-serving behaviour is a symptom of depression and self-hatred. Why do better when nobody cares and I'm worthless anyway? We might point the finger at privileged, entitled men, but who are we to tally up another person's privileges? We won't heal the trauma and suffering in this world by demonising men. As Frankie Goes to Hollywood said, when two tribes go to war, points is all you can score. When you're focused on scoring points, you're focused on judgment, on blaming the other for being wrong or inferior. And all that ever came of that is hate, oppression, and more violence. Instead, let's not discriminate against anyone. Let's start listening and approach our interactions with awareness of each other's needs. Only compassion and understanding will dismantle the culture of dominance. The world doesn't need more division. The world needs healing. And when we all stand together, we can begin to heal.